All right, here we are. Morning, afternoon to whoever tunes into this. No one just yet, but today's episode's going to be Lord Helmet. I like to describe them as kind of like a space rock or prog for those that are familiar with the kind of music that they do. I'm joined by Dave and Adam. How are we doing?
Killer.
We're doing good.
Same here. Well, I guess we'll just kind of get right into it, and I'm just going to fire away with how it started.
Should I? I'll go ahead and jump in.
You should talk as much as possible because I don't shut up when I talk. So
that makes three of us.
Takes the conch.
So Adam and I have known each other for a while. We met, in the 90s.
Wow.
And we used to we both grew up in the Inland Empire in Southern California. Mm-hmm. And we were both in bands at the time, and Adam was in Sloth way back then, sort of a very early version of Sloth. And it was, which I think you guys were a three-piece when we met you because Kelly was in the band.
Yeah, right.
And then I was in a band called Hassan Chop, which is also a three-piece. Okay. And so we kind of met. I don't know, Adam, how Hassan Chop came on your radar. How did that happen? Because you guys started showing up at coming to our gig.
Yeah. So basically, there's this little. What was that? The Haven.
The Haven.
The Haven. Yeah. There's the Glass House in Pomona was like the main venue, and there's a little. Small little coffee house called the Haven where smaller bands would play, and I remember just going in there one day and Hassan was playing, and I was all into I hadn't been playing very long. I had only been playing like maybe 4 years or something like that, maybe less, and their rhythm section was just stupid. I mean, Dave sang and played bass, and then their drummer was sick, and then they had a guitar player as well, but it was kind of like watching Les Claypool or Flea, with Chad Smith or something. It was that dialed in, where if you were a musician, you just knew, they were nobody's business, So I ended up just kissing their butt and taking lessons from their drummer and being like, man, teach me how to be good, And,
teach me.
Teach me the ways of the Force. And that's how I kind of started getting Hassan. So, and then, I'd tell the guys from Sloth and we'd go watch their gigs, and just basically we were like the young guys that, we were a couple years younger than Dave. And so we were always kind of going just to watch the band that had the best chops in town. And, and they did. Like Dave didn't he win like bass player of the year at the local shop like 7 years in a row or something? Like it was that many. Stopped doing it, So for the musician nerds, they were definitely the nerdy band to watch. Like they ruled. Where Sloth was more punk, and not punk like in Rancid or anything, but more punk just in just being loud, distorted guitars and whatnot. Where they were more of a funk band,
right? Right.
So, but anyways, that's eventually we started, begging them to play little gigs with us. So like they'd come over to a little party in our guitar player's garage with like 30 people there, and I remember once we were both set up on each side of the garage, and we'd play a song, then they'd play a song, and then we'd play a song, and they play a song. So we have history from that was probably like 1996, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
And like Dave said, that's when Sloth was a three-piece. We didn't have our singer at that time, So our Chris Doe, our guitar player, sang, and then our bass player at that time was Kelly Anthony, and he sang as well. So
he took lessons from me.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yes, we were both like, oh, they were just, and Dave's always, been that to me is the reason we even got this band together is because I had a studio and I was just getting into starting to record rather than just playing. I was always just the performer, not the guy that would record anything at home. But when technology got to that point, probably around 2016 or so, do you remember the date when we started?
We started in and although we didn't know we were starting, but we technically started in summer of 2017.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, I just wanted to test out drum sounds, and I'm like, dude, send me bass riffs to a metronome so that I can chop them up and like put drums to it and just get fat sounds and see what happens. And that's Dave was kind enough to send me, 20 minutes of noodling to a metronome, and then I started sending him like arranged songs around just him jerking off on his bass.
Right. I mean, that's kind of how it starts, right?
Yeah, but we weren't in the same. I was in Tennessee, he was in California, so we weren't jamming. We were just, jamming virtually like that,
It's funny because like going back in time a little bit again, I left. Well, we both obviously Adam went to Tennessee. I lived in Texas for a while. I went off to college, and then I was doing my undergrad in Texas. And I remember this would have been like 1997, 98. And I was in college at the time. And I remember, Adam, you called me you guys were on the road and you were like having trouble with your bass player or something. And you were like, hey, do you think you would be down to join? And I didn't. But I sometimes think about like, because then the reason I bring this up is that a little bit later, a few years later, after I came back to California, and Sloth was sort of near, in a way, I guess, kind of near the end of their sort of existence.
Right.
I was sort of in the band for about 6 months or something. So it all kind of came back around in a way, and so I guess what I'm trying to say is that we went through a period of time where we were out of contact, maybe 4 or 5 years. Just that I think that one phone call I got from Adam was.
Yeah, I think what it was is we were touring, and we were just having issues with maybe being afraid of a no show or somebody can't make it to the gig. So I was like, can you just memorize how to play 7 songs? So if we call you, you can fly out like the day of and continue on. That was how it all started. It wasn't a joining the band thing. It was, we needed a backup player for if we had a missing in action, is what it was.
Okay.
That's right.
And then later after Sloth, we got dropped from our label and we kind of ended things. Then we started jamming with Dave, brought Dave in and tried to keep things going. But we never did anything but a couple of demos, and then just kind of, and then Dave quit. Dave's like, you guys are all crazy. He was like, you guys are just so screwed up. Cause our dynamic of me and Christo and Rich were so argumentative, and we were like brothers that just fought all the time. So and he's like, can't we just be normal and jam? And we're like, no.
This is what we're used to being. So it needs this. The dynamic is this.
Yeah, I didn't want it that way, and I don't think anybody wanted it that way.
Right.
No way to try to reverse that.
Right.
It was impossible. So yeah.
I walked into that situation. I was very naive. I was very naive. I remember thinking, a couple of years older than these guys. I'm like, I was in grad school at the time. I'm thinking, I'll come in like Mr. Mature and sort these guys out. And man, I was I was so wrong. And we wrote, I think, 3 or 4 really good songs and demoed them. Then it just got a little too much for me. Mm-hmm. I couldn't. Yeah, the dynamic was what it was, and I couldn't bear it.
Yeah. Sometimes it works and sometimes it don't.
Yeah. Right.
At least you tried it, got some songs done, and just kind of wrote it for a while to test the waters, and Well,
I think what we learned, and really the reason I is that what Adam and I discovered during that period, and this would have been around 2003, 2004, was that we really had a chemistry. We had a really good chemistry musically. And even though we come from, like, I would say on any given day, the music that I'm listening to and the music Adam listens to is probably pretty different. But there's an area of musical interest where we cross, where there's an intersection.
Right.
It's like when we find that space, we can like really go to cool places. And I think it was that. It was like, you know, this was 2017. I was in a band called The Shadow Principle, and that band had I left that band too, because it was there was a lot of drama there that I couldn't quite handle. So Adam I left Shadow Principle, and I had like this batch of songs because I was sort of like the principal songwriter in that band. So I had like 7 or 8 songs. And then Adam and I started talking, and as that's what he was just saying, he's like, look, I'm just getting it set up, recording my home studio, send me some riffs. And so I did. And then he comes back with like all these bass and drum like arrangements. There were like maybe 6 or 7 like song forms, right? And we thought, oh, cool, you know, this could be a project. And remember, originally the idea was we were going to start a band called Bass Vent, because it was like bass, and then
that's
Adam's bass
name.
So, but then I was like, hey, you know, I've got these songs that I wrote for Shadow Principle that obviously that band's not going to play. And I was thinking at the time, well, maybe I'll do like a solo record or whatever. And I asked Adam if he would play on it. And then after a while, it was like, this is dumb. Let's just take the songs that I've written. Let's take the songs that Adam's put together from my riffs or whatever, and let's just start a band. So we did. And the funny thing is that we ended up doing the songs that I had written for Shadow Principle first. Obviously, we tweaked them, and Adam had a huge role to play in the way they ultimately turned out. It was very collaborative, but we ended up doing those first because they were sort of like, you could see it, like they were like 7 or 8 songs, and you could kind of see like, okay, we could do that, and we could do it relatively quickly. Let's start with this, and then we'll go back to the other songs, which is what we did. So even though Get Back to the Ship is our most recent record, the songs are actually older than the ones, if that makes sense. We put this together first. So
so this next record we're doing is probably the first one that's really a collaborative, as in starting from scratch, because we started off with me just cutting up all his bass as one record, the other one with him having a bunch of songs with vocals and guitars and everything. So this is the first time we've just started from scratch, and it you know, I'd like to say it's better, but you know, to each their own.
Well, that said, do you guys notice that the sound of the songs kind of starting to trail off a bit from the first 2, or is it kind of the trajectory is still along that line of the first 2?
I mean, so what I think, when you look at the first 2 records, I mean, the first record is very song oriented, right? And we kind of took songs, and then we would kind of, you know, we would kind of get in there and tweak the arrangement, add some, you know, sort of more, you know, whatever, off the wall moments.
Right.
But it's pretty straightforward, with a couple of exceptions, that record. Whereas the second record, the songs are there, but it's much, to me anyway, much proggier. The playing is at a different level. It's more experimental. You know, there's some jammy moments, like where we just kind of go off. None of that stuff is on the first record. So I see those 2 records having a real different flavor in terms of like, one is very controlled and the other one is a little bit like, let's just go for it.
Right.
This one, I think this new one is sort of more, for me anyway, I see it as sort of taking what we did on Get Back to the Ship, and it's more mature. It's like that energy, but just a little bit more refined. What do you think, Adam? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think off Back to the Ship, Nothing to See was the only song that wasn't one of the only songs that wasn't all cut up from the bass first, like that we added that song at the very end of just to put another song on there. So Nothing to See.
That's one of my favorites off of it, by the way.
Well, and then that would be kind of where I'd say in some ways this new one is, I'd compare it more to that, just because it wasn't me chopping up the bass. You know, we have one song on this new record that actually is from me chopping up the bass back in 2017. I think it was the second song he sent me some stuff and I put a couple songs together, and then he wasn't sending me nothing for like a couple months. I'm like, damn, dude, I don't got no riffs. So I went back in and found like leftover riffs, that I didn't pick, and I chopped them up so crazy that he's like, I didn't even play half this crap. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I chopped it up like 1,000 times, and just made riffs out of all his noodly crazy bass that he plays. And so that song, it didn't make the last record just because we didn't really dial in the vocal where we wanted it, or it didn't get completed. We thought about it, we just didn't get it done. And so Dave spent a lot of time on guitar and vocal on this, bringing it back to life on this new one. And it's cool it's on there because there's one song that is his bass just probably one of his best bass playing songs, I'd say, other than maybe Setting Sun or something, it's nasty bass.
I was gonna say, you're bringing up the bass a lot, particularly for me, the song "Moth."
Yeah,
that's the song that I was explaining in the message to you guys that I caught the end of on. I believe it was an ad on Instagram, because I get things recommended to me just from my scrolling, and they know what I'm interested in. So, and what caught my ear was how the bass and the drums complemented each other when the song starts and just all throughout. Like, that song has a groove that just gets so ingrained in my head that I notice that when I'm laying down to go to bed, I'll catch myself humming it.
Wow.
Yeah, I think he's a phenomenal bass player. Like that, you're 100% right. Like his noodling, the way he puts it together, it sticks out like in a only positive way, man. Like the song is impressive. Like the catalog's impressive. That's what I love about Lord Helmet. Like things just work, and it catches your ear, and it won't let you go.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
I mean, it's great.
My favorite song out of that record, and that song is kind of a combo of chopping up the bass and then doing new stuff. Because when I originally chopped up the bass for that one, the intro and the verse, Dave would have never known that I chopped that, pretty much, because I just basically looped some parts, like that verse. He just did a cool little boom, boom, bam, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna loop that, and make it into like a groovy thing, So it was just him probably finishing off a session where he's just going off real crazy. Then he's just like boom, boom, bam. I'm like, that's it, So then I had the middle eight that has a theremin solo. That was the chorus originally, the way I chopped it up, and Dave came in and rewrote the chorus, and then we used the middle eight, or what was the chorus as a middle eight with the theremin solo. So that song is kind of like a good mix of us collaborating together,
For sure.
as a whole. That kind of happened with a lot of stuff with chopping up the bass. I have good ideas with, what's a good template for power, and then he might be like, yeah, but we're missing a chorus, and his little melodic mind that's far beyond mine, is able to put melodies and think about where his vocals are going to go and stuff like that. So it's a good combo where, I couldn't tell you what an A chord is or C chord is. I just chop up music and play beats, so I'm like the non-musician,
that's
he's the epitome of, knowing every little scale melody, and his mind is like, in space.
Well, I mean, it's an impressive thing the way you guys work together. Dave was talking about the chemistry just a little bit ago, and like that's very evident on the songs when I'm listening to them. Like not in the studio or where you guys were sending files back and forth and all that, but it's noticeable even just through the audio itself.
There's a vibe. It is interesting. Like I said, we in a way, I think Adam and I have more differences than similarities in terms of like what we really like about music. But there is this space. Like I think we agreed early on, like let's just, we're only going to commit to record. We're only going to put out the stuff that we both think is rad, right? So it's like, I've sent Adam plenty of even during writing this record, I think I sent him at least 2 songs where he was like, "No, man, that's
not for me, man. It doesn't work."
I get a little too far away from our sort of cone of agreement, our circle of agreement. But when we find, when we're in that zone, for whatever reason, I think there's just enough of space there. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, even though it's where we disagree in terms of music, or where our tastes lie, is probably bigger than where we have similarities, but it's still a big enough space that we're able to mine quite a lot of, or traverse a lot of territory, right? Mm-hmm. So, we can play funkier stuff, like, Moth has I think you could argue it has sort of for us anyway, a sort of groovier, kind of funkier kind of vibe.
Absolutely.
You can do, Nothing to See, and it has that crazy, very sort of King Crimson inspired Middle Eight.
I'd even bring up Etched in Stone as an example. Yeah.
Yeah, there again, right? Like, that's one where I was like, I don't know if Adam's going to like this, right? Because it has a little bit of like, it always reminded me a little bit of like, what if like Soundgarden and Fleetwood Mac wrote a song together, right?
Yeah.
Because it has that melody, that which always reminded me of Fleetwood Mac, but then it's in 7 or 6 or something, and it kind of has like a little bit of a Soundgarden, Black Hole Sun, or kind of riff to it. Fell on Black Days. That's what it reminds me of.
Okay, yeah, I hear that one.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I was surprised, and it was like, caught his ear, and we're off to the races. So that's the thing that's interesting is that we have that little space where we're totally vibing, and for whatever reason, it yields some really cool creative stuff.
I couldn't agree more, and I didn't know you guys were a duo until I started doing more research, by the way. And I knew this about maybe 2 weeks out, I think it was, because of how full the sound is. Like, I showed somebody at work that likes proggier music, and he thought you were at least a 5-piece. I'm like, no, they're a duo, and they don't even live in the same state. So there again, that's a reason why I think that you guys are you're killer. Like, you can capture that kind of sound just between 2 guys sharing ideas. So that's like a testament to how, the reason why it works, like part of the ingredient to that. And so that makes me really excited for the next record. Like, okay, what are these guys going to do next, and how are they going to push that envelope even more? Like, what other kind of sounds are they going to experiment with? What other curveball are they going to throw me where I'm like, well, hold on a minute, and I have to rewind the song and listen to how it led up to it,
Yeah.
Well, you can thank Dave for a lot of that. I mean, I just play a beat, so all those layers and all those, if it's a 5-piece band, 4 of them are Dave, or you could say 5 of them, because he plays bass and sings at the same time. So, it could be 5 people plus a drummer, making it 6. So he's really doing 5 people's jobs, and then I'm playing a fat beat, So as far as all that goes, I don't really take any credit there.
Well, I wouldn't sell yourself short, though, either, because back when I was listening to Sloth for the first time, listening to your work on Sloth, I thought was phenomenal. What you're doing in Lord Helmet, I wouldn't have guessed that you would play kind of that style too. Like, it surprised me. Like, your drumming just, like, it's blowing my mind when you compare it to what you did in Sloth. I'm like, this is the same guy, and this is coming out of his head. You lay down fat beats, but those fat beats are just like, I put them up there with people like, why am I blanking the guy's name from Rush? But that guy, like, I'm not even bullshitting you either. Like, that's one of the guys that came to mind. Like, this is the same guy from Sloth, and that sounds like I'm putting down your drumming in Sloth, and I'm not. It's just, I'm saying it's kind of like a night and day thing, like the contrast, So, man.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, what you contribute to Lord Helmet is just as much in my head.
Well, I appreciate that. That's
Yeah.
cool. I mean, I always wanted to kind of, prog out on a 3-piece kit or something, like, because all the prog guys they have all these toys, and so, I actually took I think I took Tom Sawyer once and recorded it at a studio, just like my own version of it, and chopped it up with a project and made a song out of it for something else. And I was like, it'd be really cool to play that with a kick, snare, hi-hat live, and just have all the noodling, but it's not on 50 million drums, because I just am more simplified, But Slothy was really, I probably would have done a lot more Lord Helmety type of stuff on it. But, the Dead Generation record was definitely, restricted by a producer, so that was, I fought a lot. So, and there was a few songs that Sloth had that would have been a lot more progressive, but just, it's like a losing battle, just fighting with the record label and whatnot. But we have an independent record where I did a little bit more noodling before Dead Generation, where I think it's more Lord Helmety type of drums. But Lord Helmet's definitely, I'd say, my best work as far as drumming goes.
I 100% agree with that statement. Like, it's definitely your best work.
I appreciate that, and it helps to have just rad riffs to inspire, because I'm a lazy musician in a sense of I don't even want to play drums unless I got 8 mics on them. It sounds fat through my system. I mean, I might go down and noodle for 15 minutes just to be like catching a wave, boom out, but as far as like really working hard on something, unless I have a song, and a lot of people might critique me for this because I'm not that great of a drummer compared to like all these really technical rad drummers out there. But I think a drummer's only as good as the riff they decide to play to. And so for me, I'm not going to play unless I have a riff, and I'm not going to, if I don't have a riff that inspires me, it's not like I just don't care at that point, so that limits me as far as being lazy, because I'm not playing and really pushing myself unless I have music worth getting me out of bed and going, all right, I'd rather do this than go do other hobbies that I like to do, so thank you, Dave, for sending me some nasty riffs.
Well, the beast.
this brings up an important point. I mean, I think in terms of like, the whole proggy thing, I would say, like, in terms of, I mean, I listen to all kinds of different music but coming up when I was learning how to play as a kid, it was like I was hugely into like classic prog, it was Yes and Rush and Genesis, and you can hear all that stuff in certainly my bass playing, and it really got like into my bones, and I've always been a lover of that kind of classic prog thing at heart. And it would be, you would think, and I've done this in the past in like prog bands or whatever, you want to get a drummer that is a prog drummer, like a proper Neil Peart, kind of disciple or whatever.
Right.
Or somebody who's really into, Bill Bruford or Terry Bozzio or any of those, amazing prog drummers from back in the day. But I was like, what's cool about Lord Helmet in my mind is that that's not what Adam is, right? I think Adam at his core is sort of, he's a very talented drummer, but he's much more, he has a much more punk rock sensibility at his core. And to me, like, that was the thing that I was like, that's cool. Like, what if you take the nerdy prog guy and you put him in a band with somebody who's, leans much more punk rock, that kind of takes a little bit of the pretension, I think, out of the proggy stuff. So it seems a little bit more organic, a little bit more rural, a little bit more like, maybe even, here and there, a little more, it's not all this brainy intellectual stuff. It has a kind of energy. And so, I mean, I remember when we were doing the last record, there was this conversation Adam and I were having, and he was like, sometimes I feel like, you deserve a drummer who can like go off and do all of, that amazing prog stuff. And I was like, that's the thing, man. It's like, if you were that guy, this band wouldn't be good. It would just be it would be just like another lame prog band that we've already heard a million times, right? So I think what makes us, to the extent that we're unique, I think a big part of what makes us unique is bringing that more of that kind of blending that more kind of heady, brainy, whatever kind of proggy thing with more of that, like, punk rock, lean, simple kit, not a big, massive, whatever, 12-piece monstrosity, just like lean and mean,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really important part of the chemistry. And again, I don't think we would be, were I working with a typical prog drummer with a 15-piece kit and, chops up the butt and was able to do everything under the sun, I think it would be kind of lame.
Kind of a little bit maybe predictable in the sound and the approach, maybe. Like you've heard, like you hear, like Dream Theater is kind of like a big kind of proggier kind of band, and they have a lot of clones out there, right? So I guess maybe you guys would have ended up sounding more like a Dream Theater, like clone, or something like that.
That's what like.
I hate Dream Theater. I mean, that drummer rules. I was, it's one of those where like, yeah, that drummer rules. Or all those guys rule, and I'm lazy and I can barely play in comparison. But I mean, the bands that I was really inspired by, are the records are more like Fugazi, Refused, Bark Market. Those three in particular, they're just raw. They're indie. They're just, but they're technical. That you know what I mean. So it's, but it didn't take like a good singer to make them cool, and it didn't take, it just, the whole thing was just raw, and that's a push pull thing. Me and Dave are always I'm always the guy aiming to be like, let's make this trashy, let's make this really indie, and he comes from more of a slick background, and so we definitely, we don't argue about it. I think I just try to influence the trash, and then that's kind of where that we meet in the middle, so
yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, I agree, and I just think that's the cool thing. One of the things Adam's really good at in the context of Lord Hellman in particular, I think is he's I've been in many bands over the years, right? And I typically end up being the singer because nobody else wants to do it, or we can't find anyone else who can. But what that means is that, I'm not, I'm no Chris Cornell. I'm not like the greatest singer that ever walked the earth. And I've certainly taken my share of lumps over the years, people giving me a hard time about my voice. Adam is the first guy I've ever worked with, the first person I've ever worked with in a musical context who actually took the time to like produce my vocal, my vocals for the music that we're doing. Which is to say, like, usually in the past, like, I would sing for a year while we're writing in the rehearsal room. Nobody says anything. Then you go in and you do the record and you sing on it. And then it comes out and people bitch about the vocals. And then your bandmates are like, yeah, those are pretty lame vocals, Dave. I'm like, you guys had a year to tell me that it sucked. Why didn't you? Yeah. Adam, he's very on top of that. And it's been a huge help to me to kind of, if you listen to the way I sing, like on the last record or even the one we're doing now, like, I've really found a sweet spot for my voice where, it's a little, it has some propulsion to it, has some attitude, it has a little bit more grain in the back of the throat. None of that stuff was there, 10 years ago. But it's like, kind of sounds like a different singer than the person I used to be. And I think that I just really appreciate having someone take the time to be like, maybe you should approach it this way, or try this, or like, use this phrase instead of that phrase, or, like, it makes a huge difference. And that's the case with like guitar and bass to some degree. Like, he's very good about like, he always loves a nasty bass riff, but there's also a point where it's like, that might start sounding a little too jazzy. Maybe don't go there. So all of that's for the better, because, without that, again, I think that's how you're in like a really good, a really good sort of musical environment, really good creative environment, when you've got people who will critique you. It's not criticism. It's critique. And you've got people who will critique you, and and I offer my share of critiques as well. But nobody gets pissed off. Like, we've never had a fight ever. Like, there's just it's very smooth. It's a very sort of there's no drama in Lord Helmet at all.
No anti-sloth. it's
not sloth.
Well, and that's the thing is that Dave's really cool with, if he does something that I'm not into, that, like, if I reject it or let's tweak it or work it, he's not a big baby about it, That's the thing, and vice versa. He'll be like, there's times when he's like, dude, I want more fills on this part. Like, you just played a beat. Oh, I want fills. I want this loose, And so I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I'll do that then, So we're both. The whole goal is just to make it to where, like Dave said earlier, we both hang our hat on it and go, all right, that's good, But yeah, and it's fun to work with a vocalist that lets you take his session. Hey, send me your vocals dry, and then cut them up, and then I could sing a vocal that I hear there, and he can try it. My voice is ass, but you don't want to hear that. But it's the fact that I can present a rhyme scheme or something, and
right.
He's not like, oh no, I didn't think of that. Like, musicians are so moody, and pretentious, and think they're so cool, and that's part of why we named the band Lord Helmet, is because it ain't that big of a deal, man. Like, we're just a couple dudes jamming. We don't think we're Dream Theater. We're not like, oh, we're the cool prog band, bro. It's like, no, dude.
I mean, if I was tasked or given the choice between having to listen to Dream Theater for a month and nothing else, or Lord Helmet, I'd pick Lord Helmet.
Yeah.
I mean, no dig on Dream Theater. It's just more to my liking of what I like to hear out of prog.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I don't need to hear like 15-minute epics or stuff like that. That just kind of, it's hard to hold your attention span on songs like that some of the time.
Yeah.
And I was surprised when I got to the Setting Sun and it was like, what, 9+ minutes? Well, the what you guys do with that, like, there's the jam out sections in it, and I'm just like, well, this just kicks ass, So, I love that stuff, and whereas with stuff like Dream Theater, like, it just kind of gets a little bit drawn out, It kind of sounds like showing off more than it is for effective use of the time,
Yeah.
But I did want to ask you, Dave, by the way, you were talking about your vocals. I hear, when I first heard you guys, Moth, of course, I got reminded of Failure in that song. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with Failure. I wouldn't be surprised, your vocals kind of remind me a little bit of, I believe Ken Andrews is the guy. And then I told another friend of mine that even a little bit of Richard Patrick from Filter. Not that you sound like him exactly, but kind of like that graininess that you can get in your voice reminded me of. And I want to ask, what I'm getting to with that is, like, when you were kind of figuring out your voice, what did you do to figure it out?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think what's interesting is that I'm delighted to be compared to those singers who I have not at all spent time trying to emulate. It's a pure coincidence. I'm a big, I love, like, Peter Gabriel and, like, he's probably
David Bowie.
Yeah, Bowie. I'm a huge Bowie person. Those are my two favorite singers, those guys. So with this, I mean, what did I do? I think, well, if you listen to the first record, you can really hear that I was listening to a lot of Interpol and a lot of Division. And so on that first record, I was really trying to do a little bit more of this low thing and get out of my higher register. Sometimes it works. Like on a song like Remade, I think it sounds pretty damn good. Other times it's less effective. Adam has been, on the second record, kind of was like, why don't you get a little bit away from that? Maybe, try to sing a little bit higher, but let's work on the higher range, but giving, let's avoid it sounding too thin. Let's find a place for your voice that is a little higher, but has doesn't get too high, but has more energy. And I think what I discovered is that, and this might just be a consequence of, as you grow older, your voice changes over time. When I was 18, 19, I just had a squeaky kind of Geddy Lee thing going on. It was unpleasant to everyone, including me. But now I can kind of get a little bit more into that kind of, I don't know, that a dirtier place. I think it's a matter of, I think it's just a little bit the way I kind of push my diaphragm, and maybe a little bit the way I kind of just, I don't know, it's all kind of, it's real physical, right? Like, what shapes do you make with your mouth? How do you, when do you breathe? When do you push on your diaphragm to to hold a note or whatever? I think it's all of that. It's just about the body, and learning how to use your body differently to produce a different sound. And I think I just tried, well, what if I did this? Or what if I did this? Or what if I tried, doing this, or, moving my mouth this way? And, I would just try a million things until Adam's like, that sounds rad. And once he's like, that's the thing that sounds rad, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to keep doing that, because that seems to make him happy. And there's no one who's giving me more shit about my voice than Adam. If I can make him happy, that's a huge deal for me. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to keep doing that thing. And, it seems to work out. And it's been one of the great things for me is both of the Lord Helmet records we put out so far, the reviews have been, it's not like we get a ton of reviews, but we get, we get some reviews, and they've been universally enthusiastic, which is always great, but, very complimentary in terms of the vocals, which is always like, oh, thank God. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are still people out there who are on Tompkins vocals, but that's fine. You're never going to please everyone. Right?
Yeah, absolutely not.
But if you can please the people in your group, and if the artists involved are like, I stand behind this, I don't care what anyone says, then you're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny you brought up a filter too, because I'd say I was the influence on that one, because I never said anything about filter to Dave, but I've constantly through the process, when he'd get a little too low or too high or this or that, I'd be like, just be Trent Reznor, just it's so effective, So
yeah.
I've even suggested, sometimes I'll do a little rhyme scheme on vocal and send it to him, or just sing it over the phone and be like, think about something as simple as this, and it just sounds like something Trent would do, and Filter's definitely a Nine Inch Nails influenced band by far, so
that's where Richard came from, so I mean it makes sense.
Yeah, so that's where the Filter Nine Inch Nails thing probably is more me influencing him to go that direction, because a lot of my favorite bands, they don't have a Chris Cornell type of singer. I mean, yeah, I do love Cornell and I love Jeff Buckley. I like the people that can really sing beautifully, but there's so few of them, and everybody else is kind of average, and so just making an instrument of the voice to me is so much more effective than trying to sing good.
Yeah, what you said there is just exactly what I was going to segue into after what Dave was saying about how he uses his voice. I am 100% all about over somebody that can sing so Chris Cornell is one of my absolute favorites, right? But I'm much more of a fan of a person that takes their voice and uses it in ways that what would I say, work best with the music, that aren't focused on sounding so polished or perfect. I want imperfect vocals over perfect vocals, because I think they lend more to the song. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's what I'd say about Dave. I think he's got a great voice, but it's great because he does, to me, exactly that.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
look at Jane's Addiction, big influence to both of us, for that's somewhere we can meet in the middle and both kind of land and go, all right, Jane's, we both cherish all the different types of styles that's going on there, and I definitely push Dave to go more of a Perry route on his highs, because when he gets high, it's like, well, that's kind of, think about what would Perry do on that. He's not a great vocalist, but he's iconic on what he decides to spit out.
Exactly. He's very effective with what he does with his voice.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. I should have brought up Perry earlier. He's definitely, an influence. And another influence is, this is probably going to sound a little weird, but I always loved Roger Waters' voice.
Oh, hey, yeah.
His voice, it really kind of sucks. He has like zero range, but there's a brittle nature to it that it's just, sometimes it's like, man, it's like it brings me to tears. It's like you can feel, it's almost like he knows he can't go there, but the thing he's trying to express is so powerful. Like there's so much pain that he's just going to like scream and to try to get the note. And it's like, like that's rad. Like that to me, like that's a great vocal where it's like, it's about watch me do this amazing acrobatic vocal thing, like a Mariah Carey or whatever. I'm just going to like, I'm trying to express an emotion, and my voice is capable of doing only so much, but I'm going to push it to try to express that thing. And, I love singers like that, I mean, like, it's interesting. Like, even like, if you think of somebody like Bob Dylan, which, whatever, I'm not like, I really appreciate Dylan, but it's like, what a terrible voice, right? Like technically, but incredibly effective. Incredible.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, absolutely what I mean.
Yeah. Remarkable.
Yeah. And then, have you guys done any shows? Like, has that been possible?
So not only have we not done any shows, we've never jammed. Like, now we've jammed a lot in our past. Like I said, we had a band for like a couple months called Helen Ray, where we tried to get something off the ground just for a very short period and played like 2 shows. And, we did a lot of rehearsals with Sloth for a period of months, probably like 6 months or so. And we've done a lot of just jams. We used to have a thing. The owner of the Warped Tour used to manage Sloth, and I lived in his studio or his warehouse. And so I was just like a bum that was like, all right, man, Friday night jams, whoever shows up, invite 10 people and 3 show up. And Dave would show up, and the guitarist from Sloth, Krista's best friend, Reza, would show up, and that's who Dave ended up starting the band Shadow Principle with. And we would just jam all the time, just long jams. And it's funny how that kind of put us in different projects together, just off throwing a jam, man. Let's go jam. So that produced some chemistry. And it's funny, a lot of us have swapped out bandmates trying to put projects together over the, since Sloth deceased, so to say. Like Helen Ray, their guitar player ended up doing a side project with the singer of Sloth, and with the drummer of the Apex Theory. And they put a couple of demos out, and then Dave went on to play with Reza, who's Krista's friend, and with a singer, Noel was a singer for Shadow Principle. And then me and the guitarist of Sloth ended up doing a project with Noel of about 2008, 19, I think, something like that, right around when our first Lord Helmet record came out, I think. And so all these, it's just a bunch of dudes that can't get along that swap out members, but or I could say that Dave couldn't get along with any of them. They're like, Dave's like, you're all crazy.
It's too much. I gotta bow out.
Yeah, Dave was like, you guys are all just too much, and I'm like the guy that could tolerate like anybody. I've worked, to this day, I work with disadvantaged youth. I've worked with special needs for years. I was always kind of like, the band psychologist for Sloth, even though I was absurd myself, and I'd be fighting, and but somehow I could keep crazy people from quitting, was kind of my gift. But I couldn't keep Dave from quitting. I guess he was the only guy that was sane enough to go, this is a good idea to leave. Like, yeah. But with tolerating people came some sort of success on that end with Sloth, anyways, because most bands would have broke up before they got a chance to even like go where we went, you know. Yeah. And the only reason I think at the end of the day we were able to, like, you know, do a lot of big shows and put a major label record out is because we didn't quit, you know, and we should have quit. If you saw how we functioned, I mean, it was bad, you know, bad enough to where like our tour manager was like, he was CKY's tour manager. He's like, you guys are worse. And I'm like, we're like, no, that's impossible.
That's like CKY is like some of the Jackass family, you know, like some.
What I'm saying. And we weren't that bad. Like, we watched Jackass. Right. We're not anything near that. So we think he just said that because we fired him like every day, you know. We'd go big one night, and you know, and he'd be trying to get us back on the bus, and we'd be like, "You're fired," you know. And then the next morning, we're like, "Oh, we were just playing with you," you know. That was our way of getting to stay out till 4 a.m. and not get on bus when we're supposed to, you know. So he probably was just like, you know, but yeah, good times.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, you know, hats off. I remember this would have been around 2003, and Adam and I had fallen out of contact for a number of years. And I think somehow, I don't know exactly how it is that Sloth like came on my radar, and it was right around the time you guys got signed, and I was just like, they did it. You know, they did it. I was, you know, and I have to say, you know, it's like that you stuck with it, you know, despite, as you were saying, like all the signs that suggested maybe you guys shouldn't be in the same room for that long, but you did. And you know, I to this day, it's like it's all about that commitment. You know, I you know, at a certain point, you know, I was like, I'm going to make a choice. I'm either going to go all in on music, or I'm going to do something else. Like, I got really interested in education, and I made a choice to sort of step away from music as my main focus. And, you know, it was a choice I made, but it is because I made that choice. I mean, who knows what would have happened, but these guys, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, say what you want. They stuck with it. They were incredibly dedicated, and, you know, they met a goal that the vast majority of bands, there's, you know, they just never got there. So, you know, I remain really impressed by that.
I am on the same page with that, 100%.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with bowing out. Our original bass player for Sloth, he quit early on to be a pilot and became a pilot and is very successful. Is one of my best friends, and his name's Kelly Anthony, and he was a huge part in how Sloth became, you know, and you know, and then we ended up getting multiple bass players in there. You know, we had a guy named Gordon Stacy that I went to high school with that fought like everybody at the school, like he was gnarly, and still talk to him to this day. And you know, eventually we got Andy Kowach, who, you know, Lord forbid he passed away, you know, about 8 years ago or so, maybe longer. And but you know, he was really the guy that glued Sloth together. Even though he was wild in many ways, you know, he was able to tolerate everybody and kind of like not add fuel to the fire, you know. But on stage, he was the gnarliest guy out of everybody. He just like smashed the stage, throwing his bass around the walls and just crazy.
Just like Dilger Escape Plan levels of just like stage, just like rage with that guy.
He was rad. Like he'd have no money and he'd smash an Ernie ball right there and just be like, whatever, you know. And you know, just yeah, he was definitely rad. But and then you go talk to him and he's just totally peaceful, you know. But or he forgets what happened, and then we got to call someone to make sure that he shows up. But yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Well, I got a few more questions for you guys. I do have another interview to get to in about an hour and 10 minutes. When is the timeline as far as like having a song out for the next record? Like, is there going to be some teasers at some point?
That's a great question. You know, we're aiming for the fall. Certainly the record will be out by the end of the year. Very confident in that. And yeah, we'll probably at some point once, I was going to say once I don't know, it's possible. I think last time we put out Moth as the first single before we had finished the record. So we might do something like that again. But I imagine, somewhere in the fall, things will start. We'll put a song out. I imagine. I don't know. We haven't really talked about that much, but that's typically in the past what we've done. Put a song out, maybe put a couple songs out, and then drop the record by the end of the year. I don't know. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah. I think just picking what song that would be, it would be like the, what song are we going to put out first?
Yeah. That's.
I'm excited as hell, guys, and there was a question I wanted to ask you guys earlier.
Yeah.
The album covers, like it seems like it's a character on both of them.
Yeah.
Is like that a theme that's going to get carried on to the third record's cover?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Cover. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Shane Rice is the guy who does our artwork. I met him when I was in Shadow Principle. He did a logo for us, and I was really impressed with him. And I hit him up to do the first Lord Helmet record, and he came through. He came through with that character. I think originally the character didn't have horns. He just had or maybe he was just a guy, like a man. And then Adam was like, we should really put a helmet on that guy. And so then he was like, okay, so he sends back the helmet. And then somewhere along the way, somebody suggested the horns. Then we just took that same character and put him on the second record. So he'll definitely be on the new record. And the idea of the artwork for the new one is in general, we're sort of answering the question, what happens after the last, like if you look at what happens on the last record, there's, he's running back to the ship, right? So there's this hack that's taking place. And if you look at the front and back covers together, it's like one, rectangular image. If you look at the back cover of the record, you can see that the planet he's on is actually Earth, right?
Okay.
Like, burned out cars and telephone poles and stuff. Anyway, so, the question is, what happens next? What happens next, right? So that's, in a way, I think what the next cover will answer is that question. Maybe not in a really like on the nose sort of way, but in general, there is a kind of story going on with that guy.
Okay, that's answers my question. Like I love that answer. Like, because I kind of noticed it. It kind of looked like a story was unfolding, and at first I thought, "Hey, is that a space Viking because of the horns?" But
I'll tell you this: if the day we play live, either me or Dave, one of us is going to be wearing some sort of helmet. It's not like if he won't do it, I'm probably going to have to if I can get it cold.
I'd put money on you being the one that would have that on behind your kit, just going to town.
Well, yeah, I might have to chop these dreads off. It'd be so hot wearing that damn thing,
Yeah,
so.
I could probably be talked into it.
We'll let you do it then. We'll let you. Yeah, you're the front man. You should be the helmet.
Yeah. What was I was going to say something. Now I can't remember what it was. I think something that's like Adam alluded to this earlier, and I think it's important to point out that so the name, right? We did go back and forth for a long time about names. And I think it was Adam who suggested Lord Helmet. We both, we're huge Star Wars nerds, but, also Spaceballs is like...
I was going to bring up Spaceballs. I intended to, so yeah.
It's a formative, definitely a very influential film in terms of our humor. Right. And we're just like, yeah, Lord Helmet, that's perfect because it's hilarious. Like, if you know the reference, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And that was perfect for us because it's like, okay, we're sort of kind of a prog band or very, prog, adjacent. And we want people to take our music seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously, So what can we do to kind of to demonstrate that balance? And I think the idea was the name. It's kind of a ridiculous name, but also kind of rad in that it doesn't care how ridiculous it is.
Uh-huh.
And then the album cover art it's both kind of really, it's sort of highly stylized but at the same time ridiculous because you've got this space Viking running around, right? So I think it's a really important part of what we're about is like it's not all super serious. We don't take ourselves very seriously. It's like, we're having at the core of it all, we're having a good time. We're enjoying ourselves. We're having a lot of laughs, and we want to sort of project that kind of humor, while at the same time, like putting out as much kick-ass music as possible. So I think that's, in terms of like where we're coming from, I guess the aesthetic or whatever of the band is that blend of the absurd, the hilarious, and the earnest. We want it to be, we spend a lot of time, like we nitpick this stuff to death, man. It's like, we both need to be satisfied before we let it out into the world.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way I hope most people would go, not put something out that they're not entirely happy with, that they'd have regrets with later on down the line. So all of that you were just covering is what I take away when I listen to Lord Helmet, and I'm hoping everybody else takes away some of those same things. I hear longevity in the band for however long you guys do the Lord Helmet, and I hope it's for a while, and what I'm trying to say with all this is that I am more than enthusiastic about the future, and super happy I came upon you guys the way I did. And just the talk itself today with you guys has been just extremely rewarding, and one of my favorite episodes so far. You're just two really great individuals that I loved getting time with and asking these questions. It's been really, really awesome for me.
Oh man, I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and there's a possibility that down the line, once I get a clear schedule, I wouldn't mind having you guys on again when the record's out.
Awesome.
That would be a big, huge pleasure, for me getting to kind of be one of the people that kind of helps put that out in the world and brings eyes to it, at least to help to, anyways. So if you're up for that, let's do it.
That sounds great. We'll keep it for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
All the help's appreciated. Like I said, we just jam. We don't promote a whole lot. We do everything ourselves, the production, everything. And really, that's something that I could say, if someone listens to a record, they're like, oh, they could use better production or this and that. Even though me and Dave are satisfied with what we do, we did it with hardly any gear. That's the crazy thing is, we've got, I don't know. I probably spent $10,000 on my studio. That's for period. It's like, here's my crap, and I've got an Apollo Twin interface, a computer that's like 8 years old, some average mics, that they're nothing special. I've got SM57s on my drums that I'll trigger and blend. And then I've got a couple, overheads that are like $500. My room mics, maybe $800. And that's it. Like there's not a lot that we're working with. So when we compare it to like, guys that have big budgets or really experienced producers, we could definitely go to a different level just based on, a label picking us up and maybe giving us a big budget. But in the meantime, with no money, we can spit it out, so that's something I'd say I'm proud of that we're able to do with such limited gear and experience, so we're players, we're not producers, so to say, but, we produce Lord Helmet, so we'll claim that.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Oh, no, just that I agree completely. I mean, it sort of comes down to our hands, like the chops. And, I have to give a shout out to Slate and Apogee and Logic. And then on Adam's end, in addition to just the chops, what are you using these days for your is it an Apollo?
Well, I've got Apollo Twin, and but really all my pre's, I just got that ASP 880, and it's nothing as far. It just has good converters and like it's clean. For drums, I know a lot of, if I had the money, I could have an API or this or that, a bunch of different preamps for each mic to get colors, and I just haven't had the budget or this or that or the time to even fool. But it gets it clear enough to between that and triggering, And as much as I'd like to have no triggers or something, it's like I don't care. I just want it to sound fat, you know. So the Slate triggers are definitely helpful. You know, I'll take like a Zeppelin snare and a Chad Smith snare and an Abe Cunningham snare from Deftones, and I'll blend them until I get sound. So that's kind of the Zepp Chili's Deftones combos is what I use on my kick and snares to get them kind of where I hear them, you know. And I complain to Dave all the time, like, I'm just not getting them where I want them. You know, I want them to be better, you know. And but you know, good producers tracked those sounds and, you know, gave them a Slate or whatever. So I'm fortunate to have. I didn't have access to that, you know, years ago, you know. So that's makes it fun at home, you know. So I can instantly get a playback that sounds sick, you know.
Right. Well, before I let you guys go, I want to say that the sound you guys capture with what you have sounds so much more expensive than what it is. And you know, like how you guys managed to capture the sound itself, I would think was from some bigger studio with like this, like thousands of dollars worth of, you know, gear that you could use at your disposal.
Yeah.
You captured an amazing sound. Like that's no easy feat, I'm sure. But you got there with what you have, 100%.
Awesome, man. We really appreciate that.
Yeah.
100% sincere. Like I never say anything on here that I don't mean. So.
Well, Dave mixed it all too, so give Dave the props.
Yeah, props to both of you. I mean, both of you. So I'm gonna get this thing wrapped up, and probably within the next hour or two, you guys will probably see it up on YouTube. But you probably could pull it directly from Liar's Pacifist page on Facebook, anyways, right as this ends, and be able to share it. So I'll message you guys and let you guys know when it is up on YouTube, because it'll probably have a better quality look to it once it is on there. So, it's been a pleasure. Dave, Adam, love this talk, this chat. It's been awesome. And I look forward to that new record, and to people that watch this, you know, sometime later. They're on YouTube. They're on Facebook. I believe you're on Instagram as well. iTunes, Spotify, I'm sure. Bandcamp. Are you on Bandcamp as well?
That's sort of our main hub is Bandcamp. Yeah.
Well, that's where you guys could find the band Lord Helmet. Support them any way you can. They deserve all that support. Awesome people. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to get prep started for the next one and my kiddo some lunch. And it's been great.
All right, man. Thanks very much. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, take it easy.
Lord Helmet.
Absolutely.
See you later.
All right, guys. Take it easy.
Bye.